Today's video is all about the backstories of Muzan, Kokushibo, and Yoriichi. The entire history of Demon Slayer largely revolves around these three characters, and their stories are deeply intertwined. We'll also explore a shocking moment where Muzan, yes, the same Muzan who has never shown sympathy toward anyone, actually shed tears once in his life. So if you're curious, make sure to stick around until the end. Our story begins with Muzan's birth. Today we know him as a terrifying murderer, but he wasn't always like this. In fact, from the very beginning, Muzan was extremely weak. Even inside his mother's womb, he barely survived, with his heart stopping multiple times. When he was finally born, he wasn't breathing, and he had no detectable pulse. His family assumed he was stillborn and began preparing for his funeral. But at the last moment, Muzan cried out, announcing his presence to the world. However, his struggles didn't end there. Muzan grew up frail and sickly, so much so that a personal doctor once warned him he wouldn't live past the age of 20. Enraged by this news, Muzan killed the doctor on the spot without hesitation. Only afterward did he realize that the medicine the doctor had given him was actually working. He was slowly becoming stronger, but there was a catch. Although he had cheated death, he could no longer walk under the sun. He quickly learned that exposure to sunlight would mean instant death. As for his cravings for human flesh, he satisfied them easily by devouring people. Yet, what he couldn't accept was being forever trapped away from sunlight. Desperate, he studied everything the doctor had been working on. One crucial clue stood out: the blue spider lily. However, Muzan had no idea where to find it, nor how to cultivate it. Despite scouring the entire country for years, he never succeeded. This endless failure only fueled his growing fury. As Muzan roamed across Japan, committing countless atrocities and creating demons, resistance inevitably rose. Thus, the Demon Slayer Corps was born. And ironically, it was Muzan's own family, the Ubuyashiki clan, who took the first step against him. Yes, Kagaya Ubuyashiki, the current head of the Corps, is a direct descendant of Muzan's bloodline. Even after centuries of wandering, Muzan failed to find the blue spider lily. But fate led him to cross paths with Yoriichi. At first glance, Muzan laughed at him, thinking Yoriichi was just another weak, harmless slayer. Little did he know, Yoriichi was born with one purpose: to bring about Muzan's end. Yoriichi's life began in a very different setting. He was born into a family with a kind and warm mother, who endlessly prayed for a world free of hatred and conflict. While his brother Michikatsu cared for him deeply, their father despised Yoriichi, believing his birthmark was a curse. Every time Michikatsu tried to show kindness to Yoriichi, their father would punish him harshly. Yet, out of love for his brother, Michikatsu endured it all. Yoriichi grew up knowing he was an unwanted child. After his mother's death from illness, he quietly left home, wanting to go as far away as possible. He ran non-stop for an entire day and night. And astonishingly, he never felt tired. Remember, Yoriichi was only 6 or 7 years old at that time. While wandering through the mountains, he encountered a girl around his age who had been standing still for a long time. Curious, Yoriichi asked her what she was doing. She explained that her entire family had died from a plague, and she was feeling unbearably lonely. In her loneliness, she had gathered tadpoles, clinging to something still alive. But even after collecting them, she simply stood there, unwilling to separate them from their family. Hearing her story, Yoriichi gently asked, "Can I come with you to your home?" The girl looked at him with teary eyes, and silently nodded. Her name was Yuta. She was the complete opposite of Yoriichi. While he was quiet and reserved, Yuta would chatter from morning till night. Despite their differences, they both longed for family. And so, after 10 years together, they married. Eventually, Yuta became pregnant. When it came time for the delivery, Yoriichi set out to find a midwife, intending to return before sunset. But along the way, he encountered an elderly man suffering from heart problems, desperately trying to reach his injured son. Naturally, Yoriichi chose to help him. However, because of this delay, Yoriichi arrives home a whole day late, only to find a horrifying scene waiting for him. His beloved wife Uta and the unborn child she carried had both been brutally killed. Despite being different from others in many ways, Yoriichi was always deeply emotional at heart. The shock of losing Uta and their child was so overwhelming that he spent the next 10 days sitting motionless, holding Uta's body in his arms, unable to leave her side. He might have stayed there forever if a member of the Demon Slayer Corps hadn't found him, and gently advised him to lay his wife and child to rest. All Yoriichi ever wanted was a peaceful life with his family. But fate didn't even give him that much. It was during this darkest moment that Yoriichi first learned about demons. And because he didn't want anyone else to endure the same unbearable pain he had suffered, he decided to join the Demon Slayer Corps. Upon joining, Yoriichi quickly realized something. Although there were many swordsmen, none of them used breathing styles. So, he began teaching them. Not everyone could master it, but the Hashira, already powerful, quickly picked it up and grew even stronger. Thanks to Yoriichi's teachings, the Corps became far more effective, and demons started falling faster than ever before. Meanwhile, some of Yoriichi's brother's subordinates were also killed, leading his brother to join the Corps too. But let me tell you, that wasn't the real reason he joined. What his true intentions were. Well, we'll uncover that later in the story. When Yoriichi first encountered Muzan, he understood instantly. He had been born for one sole purpose, to destroy Kibutsuji Muzan. None of the swordsmen who faced Muzan before had ever stood a chance, not even those who used breathing styles. Muzan even arrogantly told Yoriichi that he had no interest whatsoever in swordsmen who used breathing techniques. And right after saying that, Muzan launched a brutal attack. Yoriichi narrowly dodged, but everything behind him, all the bamboo groves, was shredded like vegetables. From just that one move, Yoriichi realized something terrifying. If even a single scratch from Muzan landed, it would mean certain death. For the first time in his life, Yoriichi found himself truly cautious. Through his transparent world ability, Yoriichi could see that Muzan had 7 hearts and 5 brains, making him an unbelievably difficult opponent. Without wasting a moment, Yoriichi completed all his sword forms in an instant, an incredible feat. Seeing this, Muzan was visibly shaken. You could tell just by looking at his face. But that wasn't all. When Yoriichi struck, Muzan tried to regenerate his severed body parts, and failed. His expression twisted in fear and shock. At that moment, Yoriichi realized that his bright red sword could work even against the Demon King himself. Muzan didn't even bother responding. Instead, his body began swelling and distorting. It was clear to Yoriichi, Muzan hadn't learned a thing, even in the face of death. During this battle, the woman accompanying Muzan was none other than Tamayo, who would later become instrumental in Muzan's downfall. When Yoriichi glanced at Tamayo, he was surprised. She wasn't helping Muzan. In her eyes, he saw something unexpected. Hope. As Yoriichi moved to finish Muzan, Muzan split his body into hundreds of pieces and tried to escape. But even then, Yoriichi instantly destroyed 1,500 out of 1,800 fragments. If you still doubt Yoriichi's strength, what more proof do you need? Because Muzan was weakened so badly during the battle, Tamayo broke free from his control. And for the first time, she spoke his true name aloud. Kibutsuji, Muzan. Just so you know, speaking Muzan's name usually causes demons to die instantly. Since Tamayo had spent so long by Muzan's side, she understood him better than anyone. She was sure Muzan would never show his face to Yoriichi again. And she told him so. Yoriichi, realizing this, humbly requested Tamayo's help in the future to destroy Muzan once and for all. As Yoriichi made his way back, he was met with devastating news. His twin brother had become a demon. We'll dive deeper into that later. 3 tragic blows struck Yoriichi's life. First, he couldn't finish Muzan. Second, he had to let Tamayo go. And third, his own brother had fallen to the darkness. Because of these failures, Yoriichi was banished from the Demon Slayer Corps. Some even argued he should be executed. But the young Corps leader at the time, a child only 6 years old, refused. All of this, Yoriichi later shared with Tanjiro's ancestors, during the time when Tanjiro was unconscious from Muzan's poison in the final battle. Continuing his story, Yoriichi confessed to Tanjiro's ancestor, "I was born special. My sole purpose was to kill Kibutsuji Muzan. Yet because of my own shortcomings, in the end, I failed. And because of that, many more will die." This regret weighed heaviest on his heart. Seeing Yoriichi so broken, the little daughter of Tanjiro's ancestor came up to him, asking for a hug. When Yoriichi picked her up and saw her laughing innocently, tears streamed down his face. Even the strongest warriors have hearts that feel. Although Yoriichi continued visiting Tanjiro's ancestors for some time, the burden of his failures eventually became too much. Before leaving for good, he entrusted them with his earrings, a legacy to be passed down through generations. When Tanjiro's ancestor promised to honor his memory and carry on that tradition, Yoriichi smiled warmly and said goodbye, wearing a rare, peaceful smile. When it comes to Kokushibo, the one whom Yoriichi considered his kind brother and respected deeply, the reality was quite different. You see, when Yoriichi and Kokushibo were born, being twins, they arrived just minutes apart. But during that era, giving birth to twins was seen as a bad omen. And to make matters worse, Yoriichi was born with a mysterious mark on his body, something that horrified their father to the point where he decided that Yoriichi must be killed. However, their mother stepped in and prevented this from happening. After a lot of conflict and debate, it was finally decided that instead of killing Yoriichi, he would be sent to a temple once he turned 10, where he would live out his life as a priest. Because of this decision, Yoriichi and Kokushibo, whose human name was Michikatsu Tsugikuni, were raised under very different conditions. From what they ate, to what they wore, to even where they lived, every aspect of their lives was separate and unequal. And it was because of these differences that Michikatsu began to believe that Yoriichi was constantly hiding behind their mother's favor and protection. That's why Kokushibo often felt a sense of pity toward Yoriichi. The sad part is, what Yoriichi perceived as his brother's love and kindness was actually Kokushibo's sympathy for him. Even the flute Kokushibo once gifted Yoriichi was not out of love, but out of pity. Yet Yoriichi always believed that Kokushibo truly loved him. And to add to this tragedy, Yoriichi hadn't spoken a single word until he was 7 years old. Everyone had started believing that he couldn't speak or even hear. During the time when Kokushibo, or rather Michikatsu, was practicing his short spring strikes, Yoriichi stood there silently, so still, it was as if he was a tree rooted to the ground. And then, out of nowhere, Yoriichi calmly asked, "Is it your dream to become the strongest samurai?" Hearing those words sent chills down Michikatsu's spine. His sword slipped from his hand, and he stood frozen. But that wasn't all. Yoriichi went on to say that he too had an interest in swordsmanship. However, since he was destined to be sent to a temple to become a priest at the age of 10, Michikatsu brushed it off, thinking Yoriichi was clueless about his own future, and found it strange how he could smile while talking about it. Michikatsu didn't take Yoriichi seriously, mainly because Yoriichi had always been silent around their mother. Later, when Michikatsu was training with his master, Yoriichi simply stood nearby, quietly observing. In a light-hearted tone, the master invited Yoriichi to try swinging a sword once, and what happened next was nothing short of unbelievable. Yoriichi, who had never even held a sword before, picked it up. And with his very first strike, he overwhelmed the master, someone who had decades of experience. Michikatsu watched in utter disbelief. It wasn't just that Yoriichi won. He knocked out the master in only 4 effortless strikes. The incident left everyone stunned, and it was then that Yoriichi decided he could never become a samurai, because he couldn't bear the feeling of hurting others. Seeing this incredible event with his own eyes, Michikatsu grew deeply curious. He couldn't understand. How had Yoriichi done something that he, despite all his years of training, could not even come close to achieving? When Michikatsu pressed him for answers, Yoriichi calmly explained, "Before making a strike, first, take a deep breath. Align your skeleton, focus your muscles, monitor your blood flow. Only then should you move." The truth was, Yoriichi had been naturally perceiving all these internal processes from the moment he was born. He thought everyone could see them. And this is when Michikatsu realized the horrifying truth. Yoriichi could literally see through the body, observing internal organs with complete transparency. Michikatsu, who had once pitied Yoriichi, now felt a deep, burning sense of inferiority. The very boy he thought needed protection was something far beyond ordinary, gifted, gentle, and immensely powerful. That night, Michikatsu couldn't sleep. A terrifying thought haunted him. What if the master tells father about Yoriichi's abilities? Would they make Yoriichi the successor instead of me? Would they send me to the temple instead? While he was battling these fears, Yoriichi quietly came to Michikatsu's room in the middle of the night and informed him that their mother had passed away. Without waiting for a response, Yoriichi said he would be leaving the house immediately. Before going, he thanked Michikatsu for the flute he had once gifted him, saying he would cherish it forever. A few days after Yoriichi's departure, Michikatsu found his mother's diary. And what he read inside changed everything. The diary revealed that Yoriichi had always known about the family's discussions regarding succession, and that he was likely to be chosen. It also explained that Yoriichi was aware of their mother's illness, which was causing weakness on her left side. That was why Yoriichi had always stayed quietly on her left. supporting her silently. Reading these revelations shattered Michikatsu. The brother he had pitied wasn't weak. He was stronger, more compassionate, and more aware than anyone else. And in Michikatsu's eyes, it felt like Yoriichi had handed over the family's successor position as if it were a worthless gift. Even though their father launched endless searches for Yoriichi, he vanished without a trace, as if he had simply disappeared from the world. Secretly, Michikatsu felt relieved. His unspoken wish had come true. He was now the successor. He spent the next 10 years living a peaceful life, building a family. But somewhere deep inside, a dull boredom gnawed at him. Then one night, everything changed. A demon attacked his camp, shattering the peaceful world he had built. And in the midst of that chaos, his brother Yoriichi reappeared, slaying the demon with a single, effortless strike. A demon that had wiped out an entire group of Michikatsu's samurai. Seeing Yoriichi again didn't fill Michikatsu with joy. It overwhelmed him with shock. Yoriichi had evolved to an entirely different level. He had perfected his swordsmanship beyond anything Michikatsu could comprehend. The jealousy Michikatsu had long buried reignited, stronger than ever. Even though Yoriichi saved Michikatsu's life, he couldn't save his comrades. The regret was evident on Yoriichi's face, and as Michikatsu watched him, envy consumed him further. He couldn't stand it. He had to possess Yoriichi's strength no matter the cost. And so, without hesitation, Michikatsu abandoned his family and decided to become a demon slayer, just like Yoriichi. He told himself, and others, that it was to avenge his fallen comrades. But deep down, it was clear. It was all because of the burning desire to surpass the brother he could never reach. As Yoriichi once explained, he had tried to teach everyone the art of breathing techniques, which later evolved into different forms. However, Michikatsu reveals the complete truth. Yoriichi had indeed attempted to teach sun breathing to others, but no one was able to truly master it. Realizing this, Yoriichi decided to adapt the techniques according to each demon slayer's abilities, altering the original breathing to create different styles. Over time, as more demon slayers adopted these modified techniques, the appearance of the demon slayer mark became more common, and the overall strength of the core began to grow. Eventually, even Michikatsu developed a mark, just like Yoriichi. But despite the mark awakening within him, Michikatsu, who once thought himself special, still couldn't master sun breathing. Instead, he had to create and rely on moon breathing, a derivative of sun breathing. Yet deep inside, he still hoped that with enough training, he could eventually catch up to Yoriichi. However, a tragic pattern emerged. Demon slayers who bore the mark began dying young. This realization fueled Michikatsu's frustration. He felt that no matter how much he trained, it was pointless if he was destined to die soon anyway. And the person he ended up confiding these thoughts to was none other than Muzan. Muzan, seeing the opportunity, offered Michikatsu a deal. Become a demon. As a demon, he would have all the time he needed to master his breathing technique. Muzan explained that he was seeking someone who could use breathing techniques while being a demon. A rare combination. Initially shocked, Michikatsu eventually accepted Muzan's offer, transforming into Kokushibo. But surprisingly, Kokushibo later found himself face-to-face with Yoriichi, now an 80-year-old man. Kokushibo was struck with disbelief. How was Yoriichi still alive when most marked demon slayers died around the age of 25? And even more shocking, despite Yoriichi's old age, Kokushibo couldn't counter a single one of his attacks. Yet, after just one powerful strike, Yoriichi succumbed to old age and passed away mid-battle. Furious, Kokushibo attacked Yoriichi's lifeless body. In doing so, something fell out. A broken flute. The very same flute Michikatsu had once given Yoriichi during their childhood. Seeing the flute shattered Kokushibo's heart. Despite having become a demon, despite living for centuries, and despite abandoning everything, his family, his humanity, even killing his own descendant Muichiro, Kokushibo realized he had never truly surpassed Yoriichi. Even after hundreds of years, Kokushibo had achieved nothing meaningful compared to his brother. The only breathing style capable of mastering sun breathing was still in the hands of someone else. He had left behind no true legacy. In the end, even Muzan reflected on his own failures, realizing he too had left nothing behind. That's why he desperately tried to pass on his will through Tanjiro, hoping that somehow a part of him would survive. And as Kokushibo faced death after centuries of defying it, he broke down, mourning the life he had lost, the brother he could never surpass. and the emptiness he carried to the very end. That's it for today's video. Like, aim is 50, and I will catch you in the next one.